All right, let's talk about giving up. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody, to me talking about something. And this is the one video per year where I talk about, mental health, disability, all of that kind of stuff. I try to keep it to one per year because I don't want to, make this the whole brand. We'll talk about that later as well. So if you're not interested in any of that, and I don't blame you, don't worry. I have finished River of Gods. There will be a video about a book very, very soon, by which I mean hopefully tomorrow. And then we'll go on with the usual program. So, if you're not interested, that's fine. And if for whatever reasons you are not comfortable or, currently not, in the mood, mental fortitude and so forth to talk about or listen to someone talk about, disability, mental health, that kind of stuff, that's also totally fine. Do something fun instead. Maybe, read a good book or something like that. I will see you in the next one in that case. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's start with what this is and what I'm going to do. And I'm going to start by telling you a quick story, and then we'll talk a bit about autonomy and what that might mean and where there are some problems that I have been wrestling with a lot. Further, disclaimer, this is me talking about my experience. I am blind. As you probably know at this point. I do have ADHD, so I'm neurodivergent as well, and I have certainly struggled with depression in the past. Might still struggle with it from time to time. It's difficult to always keep ahead of, how the current status is. And obviously these things intersect in multiple ways. My experience is not the same as anyone else's, because all of our experiences are, our own and individual. You might find some of your experiences mirror mine. You might find that some of your experiences diverge wildly from mine, and that is also totally fine. I am going to do this in order to explain where I'm at currently, and maybe you will learn something, and maybe you can, connect some of this to your personal experiences or to experiences of people around you, and that might help everyone to, be slightly less miserable in this world, which is, I guess all that we can ask for at the moment. All right, let's start with that story. So I live up on a small hill. I usually call it the Lonely Mountain, and there is a small grocery store up here. It's technically a supermarket. It's part of a larger supermarket chain, but it's relatively small, and that means that I am, because that's usually where I go and buy stuff, I know most of that place by heart. So unless I'm looking for something very, very specific, I usually can just go in there and find what I want without asking for help and so forth, because I know where stuff is. It's that small. Right? Which obviously also explains why I'm usually drinking the same kind of beer, because, it's one of the ones that they have up there, and I do like that specific bottle opener, a bottle cap thing. Anyway, my point is, I usually go there because it's, 200 meters from where I live, so that's easy. Unfortunately, what with, capitalism being what it is, a private equity firm bought that specific supermarket chain, and they're closing down a lot of stores because, capitalism and all of that. And that will include, as far as I'm aware, by the end of the year, the one up here, where I usually go to. And now, obviously, I lived here before that store was there. I went down into the city and bought groceries there, and that's obviously what I will be doing again when this store closes. And that's a bit of a problem, because it means I have to go to some very large grocery stores, which means they're much harder for me to navigate on my own, because, I'm blind. And obviously, there are ways of doing that. You either, you can I can go there with friends, or I could, go there and ask for help. They obviously have people working there that are willing and able and so forth to help a blind person or or persons with other disabilities to navigate the store. That's totally possible. But it is a big deal in some ways, and that's sort of like what I wanted to talk about in that it does change how I live. And I wanted to tell you that quick story to sort of like have a starting point for my main situation or my main thoughts that I wanted to talk about today, which is autonomy in several ways, and how living with specific disabilities or other forms of marginalization can actually impact both autonomy and lead to some very specific outcomes that are not necessarily always the best, or at least come with very definite consequences. So that's where I wanted to start with this. So what we'll do now is we'll talk about autonomy, two forms of autonomy that I would propose in a way, and we'll go through them and we'll see where all of that leads us. So when I talk about autonomy, in this case, it is about agency in a lot of ways, and I want to spin it out into like two things. One of them is do what you want, the whole Crowley one, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Being able to do the things that you want to do, within reason, of course, There are laws and all of that kind of stuff, but in general, being able to do the things that you want to do. That is one form of autonomy. And then there is a second one, and that is to be who you want to be. Those are two different things, and I want to split them up. They will overlap again, and that's kind of where this will be going. But before we move to the second one, we'll start with doing what you want to do. Now, obviously, that's basically the sort of like thing that we all think about when we talk about agency and autonomy. It's like being able to, go where I want to go within reason, take a car, take a train, take whatever, travel somewhere, take part in social life, go to, say, concerts, go to a sports event, go, shopping where I want to go to shop, go work within reason in, the kind of job that I train for, go do all of these things according to what I want to do, without, large sort of external forces preventing me from doing that. That is a form of autonomy. Now, obviously, our autonomy is always limited within, the places that we live in, there might not be a lot of stuff going on, and everything that is interesting is so far away that traveling every evening to go to like the next large city, for example, or whatever, might be out of reach. That is obviously one thing, but those, I would argue, are up to a point limitations to our autonomy that usually work for a larger group of people. They apply to everyone in a specific town, everyone within a specific class, group of people, I think is a better term here, because you don't want to, get all Marxist already. We will get there, don't worry. So what I will try to explain here is that if you have specific disabilities, or up to a point, other, marginalizations that I, as a, hetero cis white man, don't necessarily can fully fathom, but I assume they are there. That's, I think, a very reasonable assumption. But there are certain things that apply to you because of like who you are, because of who I am, and so forth. I, for example, can't just take a car because I can't drive. Obviously, other people don't have a driver's license or whatever and can't drive. You may not own a car and so forth. That is just one of the first ones. There are obviously others that come with, in my case, being blind. Going on my own to places I've never been to always comes with a lot of risk, right? I might get lost in ways that go beyond just, easily getting lost and so forth. Going to a large event, say a concert, say a sports event on my own, comes with a lot of risk and a lot of other challenges that most people without my specific disability, for example, would not have. Non-blind people have other challenges. If you're in a wheelchair, for example, going to a sports event or a concert has its own challenges. Don't get me wrong, right? So those are things that further restrict our agency and our autonomy. I can't do what I want, or there's a lot fewer things that I can do when I want to do them, or if I want to do them, than for other people. Now, there are ways of overcoming that, of course. There are two main ways of overcoming that, and they come with, their own drawbacks and so forth. The one version is, of course, asking for help. Now, that is, of course, an option always. But we live in a society. There are usually people who will help you. That's nice. Most humans are, in fact, kind of nice when it comes down to just interpersonal interaction. That's just a good thing to know about humans, right? So I can always ask for help, and usually I will find someone who will help me. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that we live in a world that is very often somewhat transactional, whether we want to or not, right? By which I mean, if I go to a store and I ask for help because I need something, and a store clerk, helps me to find all the stuff that I want to buy, say in a grocery store when I want to buy food, well, it's their job, right? They don't necessarily can say, hey, no, fuck you, we will not do that. That's not an option they have. I could also ask a friend. Now, the problem with asking friends is, of course, that every time that happens, there is the big question, is a friend helping me? Because, we're friends, and at some point they will need my help, and I will help them with whatever it is that I can do that they can't do, or whatever. Or is it because I am very visibly, have a very visible, clear disability, that they feel obliged to do that they feel that they have no other choice but to say yes when I ask them for help? And that is a very dangerous kind of question within, what you might consider a friendship, because you don't want to have that friendship suddenly feel more like a question of responsibility, feel like that form of transactional relationship in a lot of ways. That is something that happens, that can happen in friendships very easily, and it's not necessarily helpful for friendships. You can obviously go one step further and ask yourself how that feels in, say, a romantic relationship. The answer is it gets far more toxic, but I don't want to, delve into that one right now. That's probably a topic for a very different video. But there is a certain form of power dynamic, right? Because one person in a relationship and a friendship and so forth has more agency than the other person. That is just something that is there, which makes it very awkward to ask for help. Obviously, it's something you can do, and it's something I have to do from time to time. But there is always also that sort of impulse to not do that, to not actually risk the emotional level of like a friendship, right? You don't want to constantly be a bother to your friends. And it doesn't matter, and that's the important thing here, right? It doesn't matter whether my friends, for example, would actually consider me to be a burden, would consider this to be sort of like their duty to do because and so forth. That doesn't matter, because there is that voice in the back of my head, right? That is always there, and you can't get rid of that in a world that is, set up the way that it is today, where having a physical limitation, having a physical disability is seen as making you lesser in one way or another. That is just built in, and that is a form of ableism. It's a form of ableism that a lot of people with disabilities have internalized, and I certainly have internalized that. So that's the first part. The second version is, of course, technology. If I don't ask friends for help, there is technology that can make the world more accessible. And that technology can come in all kinds of ways, right? I use a stick if I go out on my own, and that is an assistive technology that makes it easy. Well, it makes it possible for me to just, walk in on the streets and so forth, and not constantly run into shit. I still run into shit because, that risk is also always there, and so forth. But that is an assistive technology. There are others. Smartphones have been incredibly useful for a lot of people with different disabilities. Like the ability to hold up something to the camera of your smartphone and have like text recognition is a massive thing, right? Artificial intelligence technology, machine learning technology can be really helpful in that regard. We might get to that in that AI video at some point in the future, right? That exists. There are other things. Mail order is a huge boon. The internet in general has been a huge boon when it comes to assistive technology. Now, I know it's, Amazon is an evil company. We all know that. But there are situations where ordering something online, even though I could go into a store, feels more liberating, because if I go into a store, I need to know what I want, right? I need to know what I want to buy. I can't just walk through a place and just browse and pick whatever interests me, because I don't see the things, and having someone who maybe works for that store walk around with you and describe everything until you decide to make up your mind feels very, very, wrong to me, at least. However, I can browse online and figure out what I want for a while, and it will arrive here, and I I can do this on my own. Obviously, it comes at a cost. It means, workers in an Amazon warehouse, for example, in this case, will be exploited. Amazon's delivery drivers will be exploited and so forth. But for me, in that situation, it feels more liberating because at least the act of picking what I want, the act of just browsing something, for example, that is something I can do on my own. And that is a very liberating thing. Once again, it comes at a cost. All of these things always come at a cost. The technology I use to access the internet is incredibly expensive. Yes, there are open source screen reader software, and it is getting better and so forth. But the one that I'm currently using, well, it costs over €1,000 for a 3-year license. That's a lot of money, right? Just for me to be able to use a computer. So these things come at a cost, and depending on your situation in life, those costs you can't necessarily afford those things. Yes, I can afford, ordering on Amazon, but for a long time I did have a local food box where I got, mostly vegetables and fruit and stuff like that from local farms, that kind of stuff. That was really cool for me because it helped me have a healthier diet, pick out stuff that I wanted to eat and so forth in a reasonable way. But obviously, that stuff's really expensive. It's more expensive than going to a supermarket. I can't afford this at the moment. So these freedoms of choice come, once again, this level of agency, of autonomy, comes at a price. Now, obviously, if you are poor in general, your food choices are limited. That's just, the problem that we always have with poverty in every, country where we live under capitalism, right? But I just wanted to bring these things up. So that is when it comes to a form of autonomy that is about action, that is about doing or being able to do what you want to do. It comes at a price, either at an emotional cost when it comes to, say, friendship and other relationships and asking for help, or it comes at a monetary cost or a monetary cost and other costs to others when it comes to technology, the way that I just described it. There are, other sort of like trade-offs, but there is one way, there's basically ways of going about this that are either just accepting that you need help all the time and externalizing these things and not caring about it further, or there is the other option, which is trying to minimize reliance on things that cause that cost, whether it is minimizing your ordering from online, mail order and stuff like that, that has a cost of, to other people, or whether it is minimizing asking for help from friends and so forth to minimize that emotional cost to yourself and potential friendships that you value. That is what I would call giving up to a point. It's like, it's not fully giving up, but it's sort of it is very much limiting the radius of action, limiting the radius of things that I do, limiting interactions. It's certainly something I have I struggle with from time to time, and when I look at this year, I've certainly reduced, say, the variety of my diet, for example, because, yeah, of course I could go to different stores, buy different things, by asking for help and so forth, and sometimes I do that, but I do it far less than some time earlier, for example, when I ordered online. So it is already sort of like, you can see the form of giving in or giving up here means that the world starts closing in. And there is a certain level of comfort in that because, doing only the things that you can do yourself, that form of self-reliance, is comforting in a sense. And limiting the world to only the things that you can actually do can be comforting. The other option is, of course, to just accept that you ask her that you need help and so forth and don't think about it, and have a broader sort of radius of action, a broader level of, activity and so forth, at the cost of, doing these things at the sufferance of others in the way that others want you to do specific things, right? Because that always comes with asking for help. So that's kind of the level of autonomy that I would call doing what you do, or being able to do what you want. That is that form of autonomy. The problem is, all of this relies on the fact that people constantly see you, or in this case me, as someone with a disability. Now, the thing is, with being blind, especially in public, if you walk around with a stick, it's very hard to hide. There are chronic illnesses and so forth that don't stand out as easily. But, saying have a lot of physical disabilities, whether it is being in a wheelchair, whether it is walking around with a stick, those kind of things, hard to hide, which means that every time you interact with the world outside, that fact is already in there, and you are seen as other, you are seen as a person with a disability in one way or another, whether that is lesser or just as other, doesn't really matter, but it defines you. You are defined through that specific thing. Which brings me to the other part, being who you want to be. Because that is obviously at the key, at the source of autonomy as well, is to be who you want to be and to be seen as the person that you want to be. And in the case of disability, that means to maybe not be seen or defined as the person with that disability or through that disability. To not be the blind person, to not be the person in the wheelchair, to just be the person. And that is something that I feel a lot of us wish, not just people with chronic illnesses or disabilities. That can also be, sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those kind of things, right? Up to a point, right? But I can't speak to those, so I just want to mention that I'm aware of the fact that this is not just specific to physical disabilities, right? Being who you want to be. And there is a good thing that happened a while ago, in, say, the mid-90s. It was called the internet. And on the internet, you could be whoever you wanted to be back in the day, because, it's very simple. Most of the interactions were through text. You could build your own website. You could hang out in chat rooms that were mostly text at the time, and you could pretend to be whoever you wanted to be, which was incredibly liberating to a lot of people. Unfortunately, if you have something as unregulated, as unorganized, or as self-organized as the internet, something happens. That something is capitalism. Yeah, we are getting there, trust me. It was only a matter of time. See, what is key to capitalism in general is commodification, and you do that by enclosure, whether it was in the 18th century land enclosure in England that forced people to start taking work in factories and so forth, or whether it's any other form of enclosure. That is how things start to work. And when it comes to enclosure on the internet, what happened is, of course, the transformation from like what you might call Web 1.0, the 1.0, the version of everyone could build their own websites and so forth, is slowly the creation of platforms. That's where enclosure happens, right? Whether it was back in the day LiveJournal, whether it is Tumblr, whether it's Facebook, MySpace, any of these platforms, these are enclosures, because suddenly you are working or existing in a framework whose rules are dictated by someone else, a company, a corporation. And once you have enclosed that space, you can then obviously commodify it, or you can find ways to turn it into a market and commodify it in one way or another. That can be attention or engagement commodification, right? It's when you have likes, dislikes, shares, all of those kind of metrics that are sort of tied to a lot of early platforms and have been around ever since and have gotten further and further and further. That obviously also, can get very extreme when it comes to monetization on, say, YouTube or TikTok or any of these others. Suddenly, you are acting in a place and you are commodified. Your presence on the internet, your presentation has been turned into a commodity, and you need to find ways to, get the maximum out of that, up to a point, right? Whether it is just to be seen, whether it is to actually make money, whether it is to, still have beneficial interactions and so forth, those things are suddenly, forced to apply, accept the rules of that specific market. And if those rules change, then you have to live with the consequences. And that's exactly what happened with, the internet in a lot of ways. There are good reasons for that, and there are bad reasons for that, but I wanted to look at a large general trend here. See, one thing that happened around the year 2000 and later on and so forth with the switch to what you might call Web 2.0 platforms and so forth is what you would call the visualization of the internet. Now, obviously, there have been images before then on the internet, don't get me wrong, but with platforms like Facebook, like MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth, you have a switch in communication medium from text to image, to memes, to video clips even, but mostly images in one way or another. And what that does is that it makes, it does marginalize people who struggle with visual portrayal. On the one hand, there's obviously a level of lookism, like, if you are not able to have a attractive visual presentation, you're kind of fucked in a world where suddenly the main element that makes the main marketability of your presentation online relies on attractive visuals. If that's the logic of the market, then you're kind of fucked already. If you struggle with the technologies that are needed to do visual presentation, if you are, say, blind, you're also fucked up to a point, right? Memes are not easily readable by, say, a screen reading software. Editing images, photos, you can forget that, right? Because it is fundamentally inaccessible to blind people. Yes, we have image recognition, and you get like a text description of an image, and it's getting better and better. But that turns you into a passive consumer, right? You can access up to a point visual images that others produce. Producing them yourself, not so easily. And that is certainly a thing that has happened over the last 25 years, and it has made the internet less accessible in a lot of ways to people like me. This is a still ongoing process, don't get me wrong, and it's incredibly frustrating. However, now we can go to something that I feel is important here. Remember what I said about the difference between being able to do what you want to do and being able to be who you want to be. Through that enclosure, being able to be who you want to be became less possible. Like, the possibilities were limited, because you are suddenly forced to present in ways that the platforms dictate. And because you are forced to present a specific way, it switches from being who you want to be, once again, to doing what you want to do to be who you want to be. It becomes... The problems that are there with agency and with acting that I talked about in the first part, the first version of autonomy of agency, suddenly apply also to your presentation on the internet. With all the limitations, right? I remember that from like my earlier days, where I knew other people that are blind. If you want to have a cool picture and a cool profile on social media, whether it's Facebook or even like a dating profile on like a dating app or whatever, you'd have to ask some of your friends without the, non-blind friends to take good pictures of you. You have to ask someone. You can obviously also go to like a portrait photographer and get like professional photos, which costs money. But we are back at the point where you need to ask others. You can't do these things on your own. You lose agency, either to technology or, once again, to people, to friends. Which is, of course, it takes away, once again, that feeling of liberty that, say, the early internet gave to a lot of us. And once again, not just, people with physical disabilities, very clearly people with, neurodivergence, very clearly people with that are otherwise marginalized, because, at the early days, and especially with just a text-based interface, you can be whoever you want to be, and that is good. And that has been taken away. Platforms have basically forced a lot of people to out themselves as who the rest of the world perceives them to be. Now, that is incredibly frustrating, and we could potentially stop there. But I wanted to take it one step further because, see, by commodifying social media, by commodifying the internet in general, forcing us all to do instead of just be, and forcing us all to participate in a specific market, the question is, what do you do then? You can obviously step away, once again, which is giving up. You can just don't use these platforms, and that comes with a lot of costs, because, once again, your world will shrink very much, because a lot of interactions are now happening online in one way or another. And you can accept to be, or you can be, accept to be who you want, who you are, well, what you are seen as by the rest of the world. You can basically lean into that and let, once again, the outside world define you. That is another possibility, because up to a point, living in a world, participating in a platform that is at its core a market, whether it's in this case it's an attention market, an attention economy, there is the internal sort of like impulse to maximize attention, right? You want to be good at the market because that's kind of what markets are. They are always building a hierarchy, building a ranking of one sort of or another. So there is that drive, that impulse to maximize, right? To lean into the thing. Now, depending on what platform you're on, that comes at a cost, right? Like good photo editing is kind of key. For video editing on, say, YouTube, good video editing is key, right? Looking good, having good setup, having good audio, having a snazzy video editing, all of those things could potentially make it easier, make you more successful in that specific market, in that specific game, so to speak, right? And of course, you can otherwise, lean into the thing that the world already sees you. Like and there are people on social media who make very successful content about, say, being blind, and there is a market for that. And I assume a lot of people who are watching, say, blind YouTubers who talk about what it means to be blind and so forth, are very happy to do that because they feel that they learn something, and they probably do. I'm not disputing the sincerity. My point here is that this is, once again, letting external forces define your actions, define my actions, define the radius of my world up to a point. And that is kind of where this slowly ends, where I would argue that autonomy has been once again reduced. Yes, I can ask friends. I can once again fall into that dilemma. Yes, I can use technology up to a point at high prices. Yes, I can use AI editing software. I presume it's really bad, but I don't want to use it for all kinds of ethical reasons as well. And same goes for audio editing and all of those kind of things, right? So I am faced with the same sort of questions, same problems, and up to a point, the alternative is to give in by being the person that someone else wants me to be, by making my content around being blind and all of that. But that's not my choice, right? The choice has once again been removed. Autonomy has been reduced. Agency has been reduced. And that is where I want to slowly end this, because the thing is, having a chronic illness, being marginalized in one way or another. And once again, I live in Germany. Like, we have really good healthcare. A lot of stuff is really easy for me, right? I'm not complaining in that regard. The thing that I try to explain here, that I want to sort of slowly end this on, is that every day, this is like these questions, these choices or lack thereof, they are there every single day. Every day, when I decide to go and buy groceries to eat something, right? I need to decide where to do that. Whether I want to have the level of autonomy that means buying pizza or whatever because I know where the pizza in that store is, or asking for help. That's a choice, and that comes at a cost. It comes at an emotional cost. Every day I wake up and make a video for like YouTube. I can either accept that it will look kind of shoddy and probably sound kind of shoddy and have a lot of like ams and hms and whatnot on it because I can't really edit it this quickly. Or I could possibly, if I had the money, hire someone to edit it for me. Every time I ask a friend to help me with a thumbnail, I'm once again in that situation where I'm like, well, are they doing this because they like me? Are they doing this? You know what I mean? And that always comes at a cost. And when I said this is about giving in, I didn't mean that I will end this channel or anything of the sorts. I just wanted to point out that it is a temptation to just give in, to just leave these things, to just do the things that are easy, that come natural, to go with the flow, so to speak. And there are always people who will recommend that. And they are not doing that because they're cynical or anything of the sort, because they want, the best for you. And it's that constant struggle that I think is something that I've been wrestling with a lot over this year, because it is always so fucking exhausting to get up and go, well, am I going to do the thing that is hard, that will not actually be rewarded, that will not actually lead to anything glorious, that will feel kind of worse than a lot of other content that is, when we're talking about YouTube, for example, that will stand out as different, as other, and as possibly lesser, as less polished, according to the rules the YouTube market kind of follows? Or am I going to give in? And I haven't yet, and I hope I will never give in, but it is certainly always there. As a quick aside, I've obviously been for a while now going to these online lectures, well, not lectures, training sessions, whatever you want to call it, that some YouTube creators can access in a YouTube creator like partner program, whatever it's called, where people get told how to do, get tips and tricks and so forth to be better at doing YouTube things. And a lot of what you get told there is how to optimize your content towards the logic of the YouTube market, of the algorithm, to use AI because it will make things easier, to do these certain things, to get more money, to maximize your videos for specific markets which have like high CPM rates where you earn more money because, if your video is successful in the US, you'll get more money than if your video is successful in, say, Sri Lanka, for example, right? Or Indonesia. Even though you get more views in Indonesia, you will get less money. So it's a literal tip that I got told so by partner managers and so forth to do that. My point is, this is a temptation as well as a force. But temptations, positive forces are still forces, and they are still external forces. And I don't do well with forces. I really hate being forced. I'm a bit of a contrarian, as you may know. But it is exhausting. And that's kind of where I wanted to end this sort of like conversations. Like, if I don't talk about being blind a lot, if I only mention it when I have to for, specific reasons, when it comes to, say, why I don't quote full passages in a video when quotes would be helpful or so forth, that's when I have to bring it up. And that's why I only talk about it like very rarely on this channel, because I don't want it to be the thing that defines me. I don't want it to be the thing that people notice for the first time when they see me. I don't want it to be the thing that is always added to everything I do, right? People going like, well, this was really good for a blind guy. This was really... and so forth. I don't want it to be that thing, because that's not my choice. And I think choice is one of those things that everyone deserves, always. So yeah, that's just kind of what I tried to explain today. I don't know. I'm just very tired at the moment, and I figured now's as good a time as any to kind of put this all into like a larger context. I will be back talking about River of Gods by Ian MacDonald very soon. It's a really good book. You should definitely read it. It's incredibly brilliant, very urgent still, 20 years later. I'm very excited to talk about it, and then we'll hopefully get to the AI video before the year is over. And then there's, of course, Kalmas, when we talk about Karl fucking May. Anyway, thanks for watching. I do really appreciate it. You can obviously like this, you can share this. If you took something away from this, that makes me very happy. You can comment if you feel like it. You can, subscribe to the channel if you feel like it. You can join the Patreon if you feel like it. You can, join the channel if you feel like it. You can do all of these things. I am very appreciative of all of them. Most importantly, however, I want you to, live a good life, read good books, and most importantly, be good people. I'll see you in the next one, and until then, thanks and cheers.